For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating on Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway and give it to a MAG staff person. If you park in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table in the hallway. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. We will now begin the meeting with roll call of all members.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Rock Arnett.
Present.
Thank you. Dave Barry. Doug DeCluson.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego. Mayor Giles.
Mayor Giles is present.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Harkey.
Present.
Thank you. Charles Hulemantel.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Littlefield. Cheryl Lombard. Vice Mayor Manfredi.
Present.
Thank you. Jackie Mack. Mayor Orsborn.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Present.
Thank you. Mark Reardon.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Stipp. Mayor Wires.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Wheatley.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Present.
Thank you.
And Chair Sellers.
Here.
Have I missed anybody? Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Would you please now rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next agenda item is called the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are either not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Have we received any speaker request cards?
Chair, we have not received any comments for this item or any other item on the agenda.
Thank you. Okay, MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website 1 hour prior to the meeting. Do we have any comments for this item?
Chair, we have not received any.
Thank you. Our next item is approval of the consent agenda, items 4A through 4C. Does any member of the committee have questions or request a presentation on any of the consent items?
So moved. Second.
Okay, and we've received no requests to speak cards on this item either, so we have a motion and a second. A motion from Mayor Hartke, a second from Charles Hulemantel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
That are attending virtually.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Doug DeCluson.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Giles.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Littlefield. Vice Mayor Manfredi.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Aye.
Thank you. And Mayor Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone? Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we have item number 5, which is a draft MAG policy principles. Presented by Supna Gupta, MAG Senior Policy Program Manager. This item is on the agenda for action.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the TPC. The MAG policy principles represent MAG policy approaches for a wide range of its activities, ranging from legislative items to broader roles and responsibilities for the agency. We developed these policy principles a few years ago, and we update them and submit them for approval at this time of the year. Next slide, please. The policy principles describe what the MAG agency is about. This for sure has been very useful in a number of ways. We can leave it behind after meetings with local, regional, state, and federal stakeholders, as well as with industry groups and nonprofits. It's one way to share our goals and our programs with our stakeholders. More importantly, they're an approved set of policy principles that the agency can refer to during the course of the year. If there's a development that comes up, we have these policy principles to refer to. These updated policy principles are included in your agenda packet. We have kept certain things the same as last year, including this graphic that you see here, and the smaller graphic that reflects the connection between transportation and employment. Next slide, please. This slide shows and highlights in yellow where the updates have been made. I know this is a very small font. I don't expect you to read it. I will go over them in further detail. What these yellow changes are, edits and updates to the document. Next slide, please. There are 5 different sections when there were changes made. I will go over them now. Next slide, please. In transportation this year, we've changed the order of the bullet to better reflect the importance of transportation funding and placing the extension of Prop 400 in front of voters as soon as possible. Next slide, please. In the economic development section, we have added a bullet to reflect the importance of spreading the word about the infrastructure investments in the region for the current year. We also received feedback at the Economic Development Committee earlier this month about adding language on alternatively fueled vehicles, and we have included it in the second bullet you have in front of you today. Next slide, please. In the environmental section, we have clarified the language further, and we've also added a reference to natural resources in the first bullet to also incorporate feedback we received at the EDC earlier this month. Next slide, please. We have added some wording in 2 sections here, in regional analytics and human services, to better reflect the breadth of their work. In regional analytics, we've added such as housing and education to reflect the research and analysis that they conduct. And in human services, we've added the with-related housing activities to better reflect the work that's already been part of their activities as part of the Pathways Home Regional Plan that was approved last year. Next slide, please. This item is on the agenda for action with recommendation for approval. These MAG policy principles will also be presented next week at the Regional Council. Mr. Chair and members of the TPC, this concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Supna. Are there any comments or questions from committee members? I'll just make a comment, and that is, and of course, this probably reflects some prejudice on my part, but I think the one on transportation funding should be all caps. Are there any public comments? Is that an amendment? Staff, do we have any written comments on this item? Hearing none, is there a motion to recommend approval of the draft MAG policy principles?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Charles Humantle, a motion, a second from Mayor Peterson. Any discussion? Can I have a voice vote of those in the room?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Linda, will you now do a roll call vote of the members participating virtually?
Thank you. When I call you, please indicate how you vote. Doug Duplessis.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Giles.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Littlefield. Vice Mayor Manfredi.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone? The motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, item number 6 on the agenda will be presented by John Bullen, Transportation Funding Policy and Program Manager, and Armenta Syed, Transportation Planner 3. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion. It's an economic analysis of Proposition 400 Extension Investment Plan. John?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC. Very happy to be here this morning to roll out our economic analysis of the Proposition 400 Extension Investment Plan. A lot of work went into this, and as you'll see, the numbers are quite staggering. This plays a tremendously important role in our region and our state's economy. Next slide, please. So I'll begin the presentation just by giving a brief overview of our region and really what impact the sales tax has played. After that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Saeed to go over the economic analysis itself, and then finally round out the presentation by really emphasizing the importance of action and immediate action, and really what the key takeaways from today are. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the transportation network that we see today is really a result of the investments that have been made over the past 4 decades. Before Proposition 300, we had I-17, we had portions of I-10, and we had portions of US 60. Proposition 300 and Proposition 400 have given us Loop 101, Loop 202, Loop 303, State Route 51, State Route 143, hundreds of miles of new and improved arterial roads, and has paid for millions of miles of bus transit every year. Next slide, please. And those investments have paid off. Those investments have led to the tremendous growth that we have seen since 1985, both in population and jobs. Next slide, please. Those investments have led to lower costs, lower travel times for our citizens, and a more competitive business environment for the businesses throughout the region. Next slide, please. When we go out and we market for new companies, when we land those new companies, it's no accident that those companies locate near a freeway corridor or high capacity transportation corridor. Next slide, please. And that's because of our competitive advantage and the competitive advantage that this region experiences. The map that you see on the screen includes data from Texas A&M Transportation Institute's annual mobility report. This is a report that they put together every year. And what you will find is that our region has consistently the lowest travel times, the least amount of congestion, and the most travel time reliability compared to our peers across the country. We have a distinct competitive advantage because of the investments that we have made. Next slide, please. What makes this particularly surprising is that we've been able to accomplish this with relatively low levels of investment compared to what we see elsewhere in the country. One of the first tasks that we undertook as part of the development of the new RTP was to do a peer region analysis. What are those regions that we compete for people and jobs investing in transportation, and how do we stack up? Next slide, please. The chart on the screen shows the results from that analysis. I do want to caveat that this analysis is approximately 3 years old at the time. What you'll see is our region compared to Dallas, Houston, Salt Lake City, San Diego, and Austin. I do want to note that since this data came out, Austin has since passed a property tax to significantly increase their investment in the region's light rail transit system. Our region is being outpaced by all our peers, and that is with the dedicated half-cent sales tax. Without the dedicated half-cent sales tax, the story gets even worse. Next slide, please. However, this region has done a very good job of making strategic investments. This region has done a very good job in investing in transportation and getting ahead of growth. However, if we want to retain our competitive advantage, we have to continue to make the investments in transportation. Our regional transportation plan, the extension of Proposition 400, will keep us competitive. It will continue those benefits that we see today in the future, but we have to ensure that we continue to make those investments. Next slide, please. We know that the role that the investments play and the role that they've had in landing major businesses here. One of the things that we wanted to do is understand the specific link between economic development and our extension plan. To that end, the MAG Regional Council Executive Committee approved funding in early August to initiate a comprehensive economic analysis. This is work that traditionally takes 6 to 9 months. We have completed it in 2 months, recognizing the importance of this effort. It has taken a round-the-clock effort from both MAG staff as well as consulting teams. In fact, the analysis continues even today. We've gotten a lot of requests for the report. That is one of the items that we're still undertaking. However, given the sensitivity and the urgency associated with this item, we wanted to present those results. And as a reminder, this analysis is being conducted in partnership with GPAC. So with that, I will turn it over to Armenta to go over the results.
Thanks, John. Next slide, please. So shortly after that funding was approved, we began preliminary research, partnering with EWS Inc. They are a nationally recognized firm conducting this type of work in the field, and we have a few of the project managers on the call with us today in case of any technical questions at the end of the presentation. We used their TREDIS model to conduct this analysis. It's something that we've used in the past in the MAG region, so we were able to leverage some of that past familiarity in order to get this analysis done as soon as possible. And so the way the TREDIS model works is that it compares the differences in travel characteristics between 2 scenarios. And so for this analysis, we created a scenario that included the investments funded through the extension, and then one that did not include those investments. From there, we were able to quantify the travel impact and use that to calculate the overall impact to the region and economy. Next slide, please. So before I get into the findings, here's a quick snapshot of what was actually included in this analysis, both from an input point of view as well as the results we were able to derive. The key takeaway here is that there's also funding set aside for programs we weren't able to model, but that will add to this impact. So as I go through the results today, just keep in mind that although the results are impressive, they're still not capturing the full benefits of our investment plan. Next slide, please. And so here's the first part of our findings. So by comparing those 2 scenarios from a travel perspective, we found that by investing in the extension plan, there will be a decrease in congestion across all travel modes and trip purposes. Complementing that nicely was that we noticed an increase in average speeds of 1 to 2 miles per hour across all travel modes, which is quite significant at the aggregate level of all the daily trips that occur in the region. And then we also saw a shift in modal trips, specifically an increase in transit trips of over 100,000 trips every single year. All of that points to shorter, more reliable commutes, better accessibility. And so when we calculate the overall impact to the region over the 25-year period, we estimate that that's a $73 billion savings because of the extension plan. $40 billion alone is just savings for local businesses, saving time as part of their operations. And then $4.4 billion alone is just savings for freight logistics costs. Next slide, please. But the really big piece of that impact comes from when those travel time savings and those operating cost savings are reinvested back into the economy grows and the region becomes more competitive. Next slide, please. And so when we look at what happens when that $73 billion is reinvested back into the region, we see that net new business sales will grow by $113 billion over the 25-year period, $4.5 billion every single year. Of that, the gross regional product, the GDP or the value add back to the region totals about $60 billion. income growth for the region will total about 40 billion over the entire 25-year period. That's about $1.6 billion in growth every single year. And then net new jobs will also grow by about 31,600 jobs every year. Next slide, please. And so that was a summary of the total impact to the region. But as we dig deeper into the details, we found that the benefits from the extension plan are actually tailored to the growth that this region is experiencing. And so what I mean by that is that certain industries will benefit more from our extension plan than others because they're more reliant on the type of improvements we've included. And so if you take, for example, a semiconductor manufacturing facility, excuse me, and you look at their reliance on truck traffic for their operations, it makes sense that they will benefit more from freight corridor improvements than other industries. So next slide, please. And so when you look at which of these industries in the region are most reliant on these types of roadway and transit improvements, it's actually those sectors that are already our largest GDP contributors. Next slide, please. And so when you break down those total results by industry, you see that it's those largest sectors that are benefiting the most. And what's really interesting is the impact this has not only on job growth, but job quality. And so 71% of those net new annual jobs fall within median to high wage thresholds, and they all fall within growing occupations. But this growth is not going to be sustainable unless we provide good accessibility to those jobs. Next slide, please. It's something that we heard over and over again from the public as we were developing the plan was strong support for these shorter and more reliable travel times. It was a tall order because activity is increasing across all other areas, and we needed to bring travel times down. Well, we're only able to do that because 87% of the projects that are included in the investment plan actually help to enhance access to those regional job centers. Next slide, please. Along the same lines, it's proximity to these transportation infrastructure that's going to drive the demand for these new investments in the region. So John showed earlier a map of GPEC locates in their proximity, to freeway corridors. That's a pattern that's going to continue as this region grows. And so what we found is that our investment plan actually helps to prep the region for that expected growth that we think will be coming in. In fact, the investment plan will help to create or enhance access to 87,000 acres of developable land. And then the other side of that story is that it's these proximity to these transportation infrastructure that helps increase the value of those adjacent properties. Next slide, please. And so when you consider the fact that 2/3 of those developable land parcels are state land parcels, and we're helping, or by investing in the extension plan, we're helping to increase the value of those parcels. We estimate about 69 million. That's a direct return to the state because we're investing in this extension. Next slide, please. At this point, I'll turn it back to John.
Thank you, Arminta. So I do want to briefly touch on really the urgency associated with this. Next slide, please. As this group knows well, we've been working on both our extension as well as enabling legislation for a number of years. In fact, this has been a 4-year undertaking. We approved the plan back in 2021. We had expected enabling legislation in the spring of 2022, ultimately with a vote ideally set to occur approximately 1 month from today. There was a reason why we had put that schedule together. There was a method behind our madness, so to speak. And really it was done with considerations of project development that's currently underway, as well as those projects that we know we need to get underway funded in the extension. The veto has certainly impacted that schedule. And so today I want to briefly walk through some of those impacts. Next slide, please. So while 3 years between now and the end of Proposition 400 seems like a long time, it is not. And that's because project development takes a very long time. Next slide, please. So as an example, we'll take the State Route 30 center segment. This is a project that was just working through its first phase, scoping and environmental, for 15 years. While this certainly is a complex example, a bit of an outlier due to the complexity associated with it, all projects take time to go through the development phase. In fact, on average, you can pretty much calculate that scoping and environmental process will take at least 2 years, with several more years required for right-of-way acquisition and final design. With enabling legislation and a vote in 2022, we could have gotten some of that initial development work underway now. We could have had a seamless transition between Proposition 400 and those projects in the extension plan. Now with the veto, there are impacts, and it's important that we get back to the ballot as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So the first example I want to walk this group through relates to the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. In May of 2020, the announcement came out that TSMC will be locating here in Arizona. This represents the largest foreign direct investment in the state's history. The initial announcement was that it was a $12 billion private investment in our state. It included 1,800 new jobs to our state. Since that announcement, TSMC has announced plans to ramp up even further. Recent media indicates a $35 billion investment with employment as large as 11,000 people. Next slide, please. The facility is going to be located at the 303 and I-17. In order to meet its 2024 opening, 2 new interchanges were needed along Loop 303 at 43rd and 51st Avenue. Those interchanges are now under construction. They're being fully funded by the region. However, without the dedicated sales tax, these 2 interchanges would still be in the planning level. Next slide, please. However, continued investment is needed. The 303 in this area is still an interim freeway. The 303 and I-17 connection is still an interim arterial connection with stoplights. And what does that mean? It means that just with base level employment assumptions, as soon as 2025, you already start to see some movements failing. You will start to see significant congestion in the area. And that's with a base level employment assumption. Next slide. So what do we need? We need approximately $335 million worth of investments to complete the 303 and build the interchange. We have those identified in our extension investment plan, phase 1, as a matter of fact. These are improvements that could have been accelerated with successful enabling legislation and a successful vote. Now their future is uncertain. Next slide, please. And that has impacts. The lack of transportation infrastructure could impact TSMC's willingness to continue to invest in that site and continue to invest in the state. Based on our analysis, a 1-year delay in further investment has significant economic consequences. A 1-year delay would result in a $30 million loss to the state in labor income and over $100 million in lost economic output. That's just 1 year. If there's an outright delay, if TSMC decides not to continue their investment, that has even more serious consequences. We calculate that that's a $7 billion hit to the state just over a 10-year period alone. Next slide, please. Let me walk through another example. State Route 30, the center segment, is a tremendously important corridor. We have more than $550 million allocated for this corridor for right-of-way acquisition and advanced utility work. Construction of the facility itself is contingent on the extension of Prop 400. Next slide, please. This chart might look familiar from a presentation we gave back in May. We are currently at the point where more than half the parcels still need to be acquired. However, as of recently, ADOT has now completely exhausted all the right-of-way funding allocated to this project through fiscal year 2022. We are now at the point we are starting to see further delays to this project because we do not have the funding available to continue to make those right-of-way acquisitions. Next slide, please. And this has serious consequences. When it comes to right-of-way acquisitions, momentum means everything. If we were able to seamlessly continue with those acquisitions, we would be able to move into future development phases quicker. However, without enabling legislation, the future for this project is uncertain. What we can expect is that as we delay construction, that will increase costs on this project. This is a $2.5 billion project. A 2-year delay in today's economic climate could result in an increase of upwards of $250 to $300 million. Moreover, what we are now seeing after the veto is there's private sector consequences as well. There has been significant development interest along this corridor, which makes sense. If you look at our region's history and you look at where people want to locate, they want to locate next to freeways for accessibility. That private sector development is now being impacted by the lack of certainty on this corridor. The sooner we can get enabling legislation, the sooner we can continue those development efforts, the less we can reduce that risk and see an economic benefit. Next slide, please. So what are the key takeaways? Next slide. This region's investment in transportation has made our region a great place to live, a great place to work. It has made us very competitive relative to our peers. However, we have to continue to make the investment. Without that continued investment, we will lose our competitive edge. We will cost local businesses more money to do their business. We will reduce local business sales without the extension. We will lose high quality jobs, the kind of jobs that our state wants and has been desperately trying to attract to our peer regions. Moreover, timing is critical. We had put together the extension with the plan to go to the vote this fall. There are consequences. The quicker we can get a path to the ballot, the less impact we will be able to reduce on our region's economy. Next slide. So with that, Mr. Chair, that completes our presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And I just want to let everybody on the committee know that we recognize how critical timing is on this. We're spending a lot of time working this and looking for any alternative, meeting and talking with key people to find out what the best alternative for us is to move this forward as quickly as possible. And I think John and Audra and I have been all over the state talking about this. And it's interesting because everyone across the state actually recognizes how important this is for the entire state, not just for Maricopa County. That the economic future of our state is dependent on us having this moving forward. And the last thing I'll mention quickly is that I'll remind everyone that one of our problems is we are the only county in the state of Arizona that has to go to the state for approval to refer something to the ballot. And our polling would indicate that we have very high approval ratings for moving this forward. So with that, I'll open it up for comments from the committee.
Chairman Sellers, it's Ken Weiss.
Okay, go ahead.
I appreciate those comments. And I think people simply look at freeways and transportation is simply just that, it's transportation. But as John and the team have outlined here, it's much more than that. Growth is coming to the Phoenix area, it's coming to Arizona. And how we manage that growth going forward, it'll be the key to our success. And I think when we talk about transportation, we've touched on quality of life. How much time do you spend in traffic? We've talked about economic development. We've talked about those areas, not only in the West Valley, but in the Northwest Valley and the East Valley that really are going to be the next hotspots for growth and development. And to not have a transportation plan funded really inhibits our growth. I was talking to Mayor Orsborn from Buckeye last week, and I was staggered by the amount of square footage that is getting developed in his city and the amount of jobs that will be created in that area. And that's happening all over the valley. So I appreciate the efforts from you and your team. And I know you and I have some meetings set up over the next few days with the development community and with the business community to kind of go over some of these items. So I appreciate your leadership on this, sir.
Well, and certainly, Mayor, we appreciate how involved you are with us in leading everything that we're trying to accomplish with this. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, can you hear me? This is Kathy Littlefield.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering with the consideration of all of this development, and the increases in the roads and the transportation policy, are you giving adequate concern and consideration for the future requirements of water in Arizona? With all these people coming in?
Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC, yeah, water certainly represents a critical issue for the state. You know, I think our effort for this was really to emphasize the transportation infrastructure, but there's no question that water infrastructure is also critically important. And I know there's a number of groups outside of MAG actively working on trying to address that for a future.
Well, in fact, the other groups that I'm involved in now call themselves critical infrastructure committees rather than just infrastructure, because we recognize how important including water in any discussions we have about our future has become. Other comments, questions? Okay, thank you very much, John. Okay, item 7, legislative update. I understand we have no legislative update today. Is a request for any future agenda items from any TPC committee member? I think Rock is getting one called in right now. Okay.
If I might, I serve on the ASU research. I serve on the ASU Research Park Board, and we had a presentation with Sharon Megdal from the U of A and the specialist from. Let me call you back. The specialist from SRP about water, and it was very impressive and enlightening. And I think that perhaps we ought to have the two of them or others come and give us the real world about water and where we are and what ought to be done about water in the future.
Okay. All right, we got it. Thank you. Any other comments? And I will just mention that, you know, if any of you belong to significant groups that you think that this presentation we saw today could be meaningful and impactful to present to, please let us know about that. You know, every one of the presentations on this I've been to has been a packed house and very, very good response from people about the information that's being provided. Okay, any comments from any of the committee members? Okay, our meeting is now adjourned. Get the gavel. Gavel.